Okay, this is Jim Wonderman. I'm the chair of the Water Emergency Transportation Authority. Welcome to the May meeting of WETA. Can we get a call of the roll, Melanie?
Sure. Chair Wonderman.
Here.
Vice Chair Moyer.
Here.
Director Alba.
Here.
Director Del Bono.
Here.
Director Intinsley.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Please, if everyone would join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I apologize that I'm doing this meeting remotely. I'm at a conference, so I wish I was there in person with you, but even in virtual form, it remains my honor to welcome you to the monthly WETA Board of Directors meeting. This meeting is being conducted both in person and through video conference. It is being recorded to reduce background noise. All video conference participants will be joining the meeting in listen-only mode, and you'll be muted during the discussion. WETA welcomes comments from the public. A public comment period will be set aside after each discussion period and will be accepted in person and by video conference. Video conference participants wishing to speak are requested to email your name and item number you'd like to comment on to boardofdirectors@watertransit.org. If you're unable to send an email, you still will be given an opportunity to speak on the item after those who have signed up. So thank you for joining us today, and appreciate your being with us. I'll start off with my report, and which will be brief. Let me suggest that today, when we're all done, we adjourn the meeting in honor of Norm Mineta, who was an incredible leader, American leader in a number of different fields. He was the 14th Secretary. We've got a little feedback. If you please mute yourself if you can. He was the 14th Secretary of Transportation under President George W. Bush. He was the Secretary of Commerce under President Bill Clinton. He chaired the House Transportation Committee, and he served as mayor of San Jose. So a tremendous career. Passed away a couple of days ago. So at the when we're done with the meeting, let's please honor Norm Mineta by adjourning in his honor. He made tremendous contributions. I don't have a long report. I see generally positive movement toward return to work. It's still unclear exactly how far that'll go, but it's been, it's certainly going in a positive direction. Many companies, probably most companies, have determined what their plans are for return to work, and many employees are figuring out what their plans are for return to work, and hopefully they're the same plan. There are some discrepancies there, and I think some folks are still figuring it out. We do seem to be headed toward kind of a norm. We expected this through the polling that the Bay Area Council has been doing on behalf of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. We seem to be looking at a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday kind of week for a lot of people, with a lot of people working remotely on Monday and Friday. So that seems to be likely where we're headed. I suppose for the future, we'll have to talk about how that impacts our scheduling and how we are able to deploy our resources. But maybe at some point might pay to put that on the agenda to think about future scheduling and kind of get the staff's view of how that might work best in this new world in which we're living. So I shall leave it at that and turn to my colleagues on the board of directors. So let me start with the director Intinsley. But maybe I should welcome our soon-to-be colleague Pippin Dew, who's will be our newest member, council member from the city of Vallejo, recently appointed by Governor Newsom to replace our longest-serving member, Tony Intinsley. But there's going to be a little gap in time I understand between the time that our member due actually joins the board and the time that and now. So in the meantime, she's here to say hi and learn. So maybe let me ask you to say a few words and welcome to WETA.
Melanie, I think you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't able to unmute myself. I appreciate the introduction. I'm very excited to join the organization, and I, really appreciated how much everyone reached out to me upon hearing the announcement. That's not what I'm used to with most organizations. It's more like you show up and it's you're given a stack of information to learn very quickly. So I'm excited to work with all of you, and I'm excited that I get to have a longer onboarding process so that I can be completely up to speed and ready to work when I join you all in January. So thank you so much for the welcome and introduction, and I look forward to serving.
Thanks. Welcome aboard. And since the Warriors are in the playoffs, we'll just go with the basketball analogy that all the great teams have a great sixth woman on the court. And so you're going to be that for us for the next few months. And we'll look forward to working with you as a supporter and a colleague as you prepare to join. So congratulations to you. Let me turn to Director Untitled for your remarks.
Yes, I want to join you, Jim, in welcoming Councilwoman Pippin Dew. She's done a wonderful job at City of Vallejo for the last 7 or 8 years, and I'm sure she'll do a great job for you in the future. The other thing I would say that yesterday, Pippin was also at this luncheon we had at Mare Island, and I had the opportunity to tour the newest boat we have, the Dorado, and it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. People will love it, and I'm looking forward to it getting into service. It has to go through the Coast Guard process, but that will conclude soon. So that would welcome again, Pippin. Welcome to our organization. And my term, I thought, ended last January, but apparently will end next January. So there we go.
You're our own version of Al Pacino. Every time you try to get out, keep calling back. There you have it. You'll always be on this board. Let me turn it to our colleague Jeff Delbano, Director Delbano.
I also want to welcome Pippin and say look forward to working with you. I wasn't at the last meeting. I was in Florida for a little bit, but I'm back, and so welcome. Look forward to it. And Tony, welcome back. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Director Moyer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks to everyone for joining today. I would love to add my welcome to Councilwoman Dew. We're excited to have you. Look forward to you joining us here in person, I guess, in January, but feel free, please, to come join us sooner. And we got to see the Dorado outside the window, so hopefully maybe we'll get a little bit more up close. I'm jealous, Tony, that you got to tour it. Delighted to have you with us, though, Tony, for the remainder of the calendar year. So thank you for your continued willingness to serve the public. It's just an incredible thing that you have made your life doing. So really appreciate that and look forward to celebrating you here as we finish up the year. Adding on to Chair Wenderman's statements about return to office, it continues to move with purpose, but not with pace, I think. And so I think it's important for us, as we do anyway, to continue to watch how the impacts are affecting our ridership. One of the things that I'm noticing in my little area of the world, which is focused on tech primarily, is that the tech workers are coming back to their offices at mostly the 2 and 3 days a week that you mentioned, Jim, but more Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, but they're coming in for the meals. So that means they're coming mid-morning and leaving mid-afternoon. So I'll be curious to see if that has any kind of show up impact on our ferry schedules as well. So something to keep an eye on. That's it for me.
Thanks. That's interesting. We'll need to share notes on that. And we'll next Director Alba.
Yes, I'd like to echo what's already been said. Welcome, Pippin. Looking forward to working with you. And Tony, or Director Untitled, I'm so excited to continue seeing you in the meetings here for the next several months. It's always a pleasure working with you. So that's exciting. I also saw, if you're not following San Francisco Bay Ferry's Twitter account, it's time to start. It's always fun to see the tweets. And my favorite right now is actually about process and getting on and off the ferry, and an announcement that in mid-May, in just a little more than a week, bicyclists will get off ferries during weekdays. So they will get off first. And on weekends, the ferries will let off pedestrians, walk-ons first and bikes last. And I think these are kinds of strategies that are so important to test, see how they work, and if they improve the flow on and off, and are easy for our riders to adjust to. And just to show that we're all in this together. We want to make the process as smooth as possible, getting on and off. And I saw that yesterday Caltrain actually had full bike, 2 full bike cars on one of the trains in the late afternoon. So I'm sure we're going to see the same here with fuller ferries and more bicyclists on and off in various sizes and lengths and weights, etc.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for your comments, Director Alba. That's good. Good to hear that direction and the associated tweets. I'll just comment. I had the chance to ride on the vessel in Portsmouth, England. That was the mother or father of the Dorado. So it was a terrific. Nina Rannells, the former executive director, and I were over there actually to visit with the hovercraft, and took the opportunity to ride on it, and we were really impressed. So I'm glad that we were able to secure a vessel like that, and I think it'll be a terrific. It'll be 2 terrific additions to the fleet. And finally, I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Murphy. For he and his team's comments. I did want to mention, it's my understanding that Regional Measure 3 is now slated for hearing at the California Supreme Court. So we've been waiting for this for a long time. We're going to be talking about the budget later today. So Regional Measure 3, obviously, we don't know the outcome of their deliberation on it, but we've been waiting a long time for the court to actually take up the case. So that's coming. And one way or the other, we'll know the answer, I think, within not too distant future. So maybe Director Murphy could comment about that. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Seamus.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman. Yeah, why don't we get an update from council on the status of the Regional Measure 3 lawsuit? This development happened after the agenda was put together, but maybe information.
Sure. Just as an informational update, actually, there is progress, maybe not as quick as we would like. The Zali case, which is the first case that has been pending with the California Supreme Court, is now scheduled for oral argument on May 24th. So that's a good step, because when that happens, and that starts the time frame for when the court needs to issue its decision. So we're thinking that may mean we'll hear something on that case by the end of the summer, at which point then we'll know which way the wind blows in terms of our RM3 litigation. So we'll keep you posted, but it's good to know that something has been scheduled. So there is some movement.
Could I ask a question? Are we allowed to talk about this since it's not an agendized item?
Sure, you can ask if it's just informational. I'm happy to try.
Since I've always been a little put off by the fact that these cases are linked together, because they are two separate cases. They come from different places. So if we're, if to the extent that they are different, then we think our case is better than their case. I have no idea if that's true or not, but if, since they're going first, and if the court is unimpressed with their side on this, do we have any opportunity to say to the court, well, these are really very different cases after all, and can we press our argument on how they're different and why they should see our case in a better light.
Right. I think that's a point well taken. In the briefing that was done for the Zali case, there is an amicus, a Friends of the Court brief that was filed on behalf of MTC and BATA to represent the interests of, the transit segment. So to the extent that there are dissimilarities or things that we needed to point out, I believe that is being represented in the current Zali litigation. Now, again, I guess it was the discretion of the California Supreme Court to decide that they needed to look at Zali first and then consider the RM3 litigation next. But it isn't as if there isn't a voice at the table as this continues. And in fact, I'm sure that there will be a lot of people tuning into the argument to make sure that those distinctions are represented.
Okay, thank you. Very good. We'll go back to Director Murphy.
Thank you. So a couple items from the Executive Director report I wanted to call out. I'm sure everybody heard that a federal court overturned the CDC mask mandate at the federal level. Transit agencies have been discussing as a group in the Bay Area how to respond to that ruling. All of the agencies agreed once California decided that a renewed public health order at the state level was not required, and that masks should be strongly recommended on transit but not mandated on transit. That happened the very next day, and that was the prompt for all of our agencies to go ahead and make masks optional but strongly recommended on our system. That's how we've been operating since that decision was made. Local officials have also declined to implement their own local mandates. So we're following the guidance of the public health experts in this case, as we have throughout the duration of the pandemic. We have not received significant pushback from our riders. In fact, the ridership has been fairly quick to adopt the new option on board. Our ridership has not declined as a result of the change in policy. So we'll be keeping a close eye on this still, in particular because there is an appeal that's been filed by the CDC, not because the CDC hopes to re-implement a mandate at the federal level, rather because the precedent of a court overruling a CDC public health directive is a precedent that they do not want to set. And so the appeal's been filed in that case. And then also developments just last week, the AC Transit Board, which is an elected board of directors, did ask for an opportunity to consider a mask mandate that would be specific to that agency. The board voted 3-3 to implement that mandate, so it does not it did not pass. However, the BART board decided to do the same thing, and that board did pass a BART-specific mandate through July 18th for that agency on a unanimous vote with a couple of abstentions. So we, as the other agencies, have discussed how they intend to respond. Everybody is in agreement that we should maintain our position of following the public health expertise in this manner, not ask our operators, our crews to enforce anything that is not backed up by the public health officials' opinions. And so we'll continue to do that as a policy on WETA and keep you appraised of any changes as the situation evolves. Thank you, Chair Wonderman, for introducing Pippin Dew and highlighting her appointment. We're excited about that. It's great to have a Vallejo presence on this board continued. And also thank you to Director Antinelli for his willingness to continue to serve on this board. I know we all benefit from that. With that, I will turn it over to Ozzy Ruano for the ridership and recovery update. And while he's preparing, I want to just congratulate the planning team. Ozzy is our planning intern on the planning team. Congratulate them and our operations team on the successful delivery of the Dorado. We're really looking forward to putting that vessel into service. It's going to perform really well for all of our routes. It would be a value added to all of our routes, the speed that the Dorado offers and the time savings that it's going to create for customers is really enticing, along with the fuel efficiency and the cost savings there. Couldn't happen at a better time. Ozzy, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Seamus. Hi, everyone. Osmond or Ozzy Ruano, Transportation Planning Intern with WETA. In terms of ridership, we had a good April. Weekday ridership saw a 17% growth in April in comparison to March. Weekend ridership was also up 4% in the month and continues to be a strong aspect of our ridership, surpassing 2019 weekend ridership levels, as has been the new norm. Actual ridership is above the projected budget assumption for the first time since the end of 2021 in December. And overall, in the month of April, we were at approximately 68% of pre-pandemic ridership. The Vallejo and Richmond routes were particularly strong toward the end of March and throughout April. Vallejo continues to be our busiest route. It saw a daily average of 1,300 riders in March, and that average actually increased to 1,600 throughout April. Last month, Kevin noted that Richmond was on a strong trajectory, and Richmond has continued that strong trajectory into April. Richmond ridership actually ended the month at 85% of pre-COVID levels. Service to Oracle Park began toward the beginning of last month and averaged approximately 350 boardings per service day during that time. We've actually recently seen those numbers increase to about 520 per service day here toward the end of April, which would also include a Vallejo post-game service. We also had a question last month related to South San Francisco ridership. Just to provide a quick update, we started to see an increase in ridership on this route toward the end of March and into April. And ridership for South SF averaged approximately 200 riders per day in April. Lastly, a note on the ridership comparison moving forward. Next month, we will be adjusting our statistical comparison to the summer seasonal averages. So this change will be reflected when evaluating the percentages of pre-pandemic ridership moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozzy. Chair Wonderman, that concludes the Executive Director's report. Happy to respond to any questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you. How are we anticipating for May and beyond in terms of the ridership? Are we seeing the trend continue at this point?
We don't see any reason why ridership would slow down. We think it'll pick up. It historically does as the weather gets warmer. We've definitely noticed that with the few storms that have come through, that's impacted our ridership. So we expect that trend will continue. We have a 2-year budget outlook later on in the agenda with some ridership assumptions that reflect that over the course of the next 2 years. So we're excited to talk about that. And good news all around. We could all be, obviously, we've had some uncertain times over the last year, so we're not counting our chickens, but we're happy with the direction that things are going so far.
Yeah, I would say it's a very encouraging report and great, great to hear about both Vallejo and Richmond doing well. That's and the weekend traffic even picking up even more. That's very exciting. Fellow directors, any comments, questions about the Executive Director's report?
Can I ask about the governor's free transit proposal? Do you have any insights or intelligence about that, or sense of impacts?
We think it's evolving. There's been some pushback from agencies worried about being overwhelmed by riders. We haven't been one of those pushing back. We think that being overwhelmed is not a bad thing necessarily right now. It has potential to also, the way it's structured, add some additional runway to our operations and provide some additional subsidy. The way that they've based the subsidy that's being proposed, it would be based on FY20 ridership fare revenue. And that is 3 months of FY20 fare revenue is much better than 3 months of the fare revenue that we're getting now. So it would be additive in that case. It still has a long way to go, and it's wrapped up in a bunch of other issues that are happening at the state level around the surplus. So it's a little bit unpredictable. Transit agencies are cooperating with MTC to develop a coordinated message on this. And I don't think anybody wants to say no to the idea of offering this much needed relief to riders around the state.
And if it goes through, what are the 3 months?
That is to be determined.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, do not have those details
I
yet.
missed it. No wonder. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Alba?
First off, approaching 70% of pre-pandemic ridership is fantastic. And the entire WETA, San Francisco Bay Ferry, Blue and Gold fleet, you should be so proud of yourselves for having achieved that. It's mind-blowing that we're at that number now. So congratulations to everyone. A question about the WETA project-specific funding request on page 2 regarding the two, let's see here, WETA vessels under construction. Can I ask a question about that? So there's a request for funding out to install the diesel particulate filters. What timing would we need to have of that? When would we need to make a decision whether they're being installed now or later with the construction underway? Do we still have 6 months or a year to make that decision, or are we running out of time in regards to where in the construction schedule these two ferries are?
Yeah, I believe we do have the ability to install these after construction has been completed, but I want to defer to Tim is on the Zoom. Yeah, you're unmuted. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so we've allotted room for the DPFs that we want to install for the man engines. The DPFs are currently in a test stage on a test bench in Europe, and they're not ready to sell or to be installed. And so our goal has always been to install the DPFs as soon as possible when they're available. Ideally, we would have them installed during the shipyard period. That's our goal, but that's dependent on when they become available to the public.
Great. I appreciate it. Yeah, how big
But
are
to
they?
answer your question specifically, if we have the boats delivered next year without the DPFs installed, we've allotted space, and what we would do is install it here pierside or at a local shipyard.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Director Alba. Any other comments or questions from members of the board? Okay, if not, then thank you thank you for your report. Or Tony, you have a question?
No.
Okay, thanks very much. Let's move on to the consent calendar. There's 4 items, A through D. The first is to adopt the resolution we adopt every month on AB 361 on remote meetings. We have the board meeting minutes from last month. Item C is an authorization release, a request for proposal for on-call professional engineering consulting services for ongoing capital planning, construction, management, and vessel design. And finally, item D, authorizing the release of an RFP for all-electric vessel construction for the MV Untitled replacement vessel. 25 years. Does any member of the Board of Directors wish to remove an item from the consent calendar for separate consideration?
No, I don't want to do that, but I just want to make a comment that it's really exciting that we're replacing it with a all-electric vessel, free of emissions. And I'm not, the irony is not lost on me that the first sentence of the report states that the MV in Tintley is reaching the replacement age of 25.
Yeah, well, no comment from here. Any member wish to move an item?
Chair Wonderman, I would just like to echo what Director Tintley just said. This is huge that we're at the point where we're moving forward with all electric at the capacity, 350 passengers. I think it's fantastic.
Okay, if we get any more comments, I'm going to remove the item myself so that we all, I think feelings are being generated about this item. And we may want to take, have a moment. Any member of the public wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Okay, if not, can I have a motion on the consent calendar?
Moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would you please call the roll, Melanie?
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Tinsley.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The consent calendar is approved. Item number 7 is approving a contract award to Elliott Bay Design Group for construction management services for the MV in Tintley replacement vessel. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman. Jeff Powell, our engineering and maintenance administrator.
Chair Wonderman, board members, good afternoon. I'm Jeff Powell, WETA's engineering maintenance administrator. This item's recommendation is for the award of the construction management services for the replacement vessel in Tintley to Elliott Bay Design Group. A little background about the process and how we came to this recommendation. In November of 21, the board authorized the release of an RFP for these services. The RFP was released in January after the overall project DBE goal was set. Importantly to note that there are no specific contract DBE goals, only an overall project goal. March 11th, there was a total of 5 proposals that were received. An evaluation team was established and determined all proposals were responsive and began the evaluation process based on the criteria set out in WETA's administration code and in the RFP. Main categories for evaluation included project understanding and approach, proposers' qualifications and experience, qualification and experience of key personnel, and there was a total of 100 points possible with each category holding a weighted value. Pricing is not an evaluation criteria in this selection process, although pricing was determined to be fair and reasonable with negotiated not to exceed amount. The final scoring and evaluation process is documented in the board memorandum, scoring table 1. Elliott Bay Design Group was the highest ranked proposer. If you've noticed, the scoring table and the final scoring was close between the top rated proposers. The evaluation committee conducted reference interviews presented by all proposers, which reinforced the evaluation committee's final scoring and determination, further supporting the quality of proposals that we've been receiving. A notice of intent was released on the WETA website on April 19th, 2022, and all proposers were contacted and informed of the notice. The Tintley replacement project was included in the fiscal calendar 21-22 capital budget. Sufficient funds are in the total project budget to support this award of not to exceed $1,322,355. This represents about a 5% of the total project funding. The recommendation is to award Elliott Bay Design Group with the construction management services for the replacement vessel and Tintley agreement. With that, I would like to be thrilled to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions?
Shocking, but I have some. So first, thank you. That was great. A great presentation, and I love that you're here in person. So thank you very much for that. You went quick, and so I think I caught it, but I noticed how close the scores were, and I think you said that represented just the quality of the proposals you got. So that's awesome. But I think you said you went back and kind of looked at them again.
So we wanted to make sure we provided a fair evaluation. So we contacted the references as listed out and references that referenced all the proposers, and reaching out to those references kind of supported the evaluation committee's determination on the score and supported what their findings were. So yes.
And do you ever go across and look at, like, I don't know how many panelists there were, but let's say there were 5, did all 5 have Elliott Bay ranked first? Like, do you look at the actual rankings, or do you only look at the bottom line scores? In other words, because different people have, you know, their top ranked person, maybe
The
only
evaluation,
5 and somebody else.
for the final scores, the evaluation committee was, they all supported the first place. All their scores were in alignment.
That's awesome. That was the answer I was looking for. And then I totally understand why there's no DBE participation, but I noticed there's a high percentage of SBE participation. Can you give us a little understanding of like, what will that mean for the project itself?
It's a great question. I'm going to defer a little bit to Lauren on that one.
Elliott, you got to be on the mic, Lauren.
Elliott Bay themselves is the SBE, so that participation is their portion of the contract. They have a subcontractor who's not an SBE, and I think that was 14%, so or maybe 16%, so it makes up the difference.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That's it for me.
Great questions. Thank you. Other questions on this item from the board? Thank you. Melanie, has anyone signed up on item number 7 from the public to comment or ask question?
No one has signed up.
Anyone wish to this time? You can use the hand raise function under reactions or scream out, depending on your status. If not, let's close the, thank you very much for the report and good explanation. And let's close this item and get a motion if we can on item 7.
I will move.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks for the motion and second. Melanie, would you call a roll on 7, please?
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Dr. Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Antipolis.
Yes.
Resolution 2022-17 adopted.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's move on to item number 8. We had a conversation last month that was an information item, now an action item. Sea change hydrogen powered vessel demonstration project. This is an exciting item. Let's go to the team for a report.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman. Yeah, this is exciting. We are recommending that the board proceed with authorizing the agency to demonstrate this really one-of-a-kind vessel and put it into service. As you know, we've received a lot of support from stakeholders who have been involved in this project, urging us to find a way to put it into operation. WETA has also separately been reiterating with our grant applications, our long-term planning, our business plan, and our coordination with the Air Resources Board at the state level, our commitment to transitioning to zero emission service. This reinforces that. This is really a one-time opportunity that we have to be a leader in demonstrating the first vessel of its kind and demonstrating that hydrogen will work for a maritime application, also using it as an opportunity to identify the challenges that this technology poses at this stage in its evolution. We won't get a better shot than this to accomplish goals like that. There is a cost associated with doing this demonstration project. The $1.7 million cost would fund a 6-month operation, as we reported in the information item last month. The plan to put it into service on the San Francisco waterfront will make sure that it gets a lot of attention and really is front and center in terms of our network. We have been looking at ways to partner with others to minimize the cost associated with this. We would be funding this project, what WETA's share of this project, with federal funds that would otherwise be going to support other components of our network. The vessel will be productive. As you note in the staff report, does not meet all of the qualifications that a WETA vessel normally would need to meet to be put into service, but it of course has the unique attributes of a hydrogen zero emissions vessel. Some clarifications on some of those characteristics of this vessel, though. It is 75 passengers. The staff report notes 70. It can go faster than 11 knots, but not continuously. It would need to stop and be repowered. It would be going faster than 11 knots over an extended extended period of time would require it to have some battery assist. It can't run faster than 11 knots off the fuel cell alone. It is possible that it could operate longer than 8 hours without being fueled, but we really need to test that and put it into application to understand what the fueling attributes and requirements will be. That's one of the exciting things that I think we'll learn in the operation of this vessel. In terms of our efforts to minimize the cost involved and make this an easier decision for the board, we've received a lot of interest. We know that the Golden Gate Highway Bridge Transit District will be bringing an item to their board later this month to contribute $300,000 to this effort. They're also interested in understanding how the characteristics and how this vessel will perform when it's put into service. There are other private sector partners that we've reached out to, and we're in various stages of discussion with them about their willingness to participate as sponsors. But we know we are going to get some contributions to this effort that are significant and will minimize the costs involved. The Fiscal Impact has some information about fare revenue that we're receiving now on a month-to-month basis compared to what we received pre-pandemic. That's in there to really just clarify that in terms of our runway and the impact that this expense would have on our runway, if the expense is in the estimated range of approximately $1 million, it would shorten our runway by a month if we maintain our same revenue that we're experiencing now. We of course expect that revenue to increase, and so that impact would be less the more that ridership and revenue goes up over time. So that is really a worst case scenario, and one that we think convinces us to move forward and make the recommendation that the agency should move forward with this opportunity. The recommendation before you is to amend the current fiscal year budget to allow us to put this vessel into operation for one of the 6 months that it would be operating. The cost associated with that is in the staff report, $281,500. That would be for June operations, assuming that we're able to move forward with it on that time frame. The remainder of the costs associated with this project, we just share, would be carried into the FY 2023 budget. The other action that you would be taking today would be allowing us to amend the operating contract with Blue and Gold so that they could lease this vessel and operate it as a part of their service to WETA with their crews and their maintenance staff. And then thirdly, we would seek your authorization to negotiate and execute agreements with our private and public sector partners so that we can secure funding to help balance out the costs associated with this project. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or respond to comments.
Thanks very much, Seamus. So, I'll just comment and maybe ask a question. On the comment side, I think this is really opportune for us and a really exciting way we can move forward and show our commitment to a zero emission technology, something that really hasn't been explored this way, and show how it actually works and find the the strengths and the challenges that are associated with it. Bring a lot of attention to water transit while we're doing it, and I think in a conversation I had with Governor Newsom a while back, he reflected on his desire at the time he was on the predecessor board on WTA to have this kind of a service that would sort of run from the northern waterfront and around to the ferry building, so that folks could be transported from location to location and get the benefits of different assets along the waterfront. So I'm not sure this exactly fulfills. He would have to say whether this was directly fulfilling what his vision was for that, but it'd be nice to be able to report to him that we're not, not only are we serving the waterfront of San Francisco that way, but also we're doing it with a first of its kind zero emission vessel. So I think it's worth the investment in general. obviously with limitation on our part, but this is a big deal. Of course, it's going to cost some money kind of to go in on the front end on something like this, but the gains that could come out on the back end are, I think greater than the investment. So that's my comment. The related question is, there's something about this to me that seems like a government type investment, outside an agency that has a very tight budget. And, I'm wondering if there were any, if there either were or could be any opportunities for grant funding from an agency. I know some attempts were made. Are there any current conversations in which state government at any level could contribute to this?
Yeah, we did look under every stone and talk to the state, several agencies that operate at the state level and local regional level. We didn't get any bites, and I think that has to do a lot with just the liquidity and having to do this on shorter notice outside of the course of the regular grant cycles. It's possible that other grant opportunities could emerge that allow us to continue to extend this demonstration project or fund it retroactively. And we'll keep an eye out for those, but we really did have an expanded set of conversations with the folks that have encouraged us to put it into operation, and others that would be a natural to support something like this. Lots of support, but very little dollars that they were able to put forward outside of the Golden Gate Transit District. I should add, Chair Wonderman, that Pace Rowley from the Switch team, the owner of the vessel, is on the Zoom, and if you have any questions for him, I know he's available to respond.
Yeah, sure. Maybe it would be good to take a moment and ask Pace to make a comment, put so much effort into this, and this is an important partnership for them as much as it is for us. Pace, you there?
I'm here and I apologize. I'm in an airport, so if the background noise, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, this has been it's a pretty monumental milestone shipping industry. To be able to such a high horsepower, and this is a very small one, still very high horsepower of this technology, and it's required a lot of different partners with public and private to get it finished, and really have it in a high profile operation as WETA's operation. So it would be.
I think we may have lost Pace.
My sense was that he found the whole thing to be a positive thing. But I shouldn't speak for a testifying individual. But let's turn to. I have one other question. So we're kind of getting out. I realize there are time issues with making all of this happen. So we're getting out in front of this, and it would seem to be taking the risk financially, and we want to make that risk minimal. So I think you were talking about this, but how confident are you, and to sort of what degree do you think we'll be able to defray WETA's share of the overall cost?
Yeah, based on what we've heard so far, we're very confident we'll be able to get a significant amount of contributions to this effort. There are lots of private sector companies that are excited about the opportunity to promote what they're doing from a greenhouse gas reduction standpoint, and this is a platform that they could use to be able to do that. Golden Gate is very excited. They presented this as an information item to their board last month and got an enthusiastic response from their board members. So there will for sure be some contribution available to offset WETA cost, but we wanted to present the board with a worst case scenario and what that would mean for us carrying the total cost of this demonstration project. We would still recommend that we move forward if that was the case, but we want to share our confidence that we will be able to defray a significant amount of those costs.
Great. So I think we would expect if the board is in favor of this, we would expect you to come back to us at a sort of a time certain, a couple of months, 3 months, with a report on how it's all going, including the financial aspect of it, and maybe give a chance to some of the sponsors to even take a bow and have a maybe deeper conversation, because it's not a passing fancy. The potential for hydrogen to become a major part of the institution of zero emission transportation. It's not all new, and it's really important. So I'm glad to see us out front doing this. Do I have questions and comments from colleagues on the board?
So Jim, Jeff, I know I've been sitting here for a while, and it's a lot of the talk in the room has been electric and hydrogen and alternative wind driven, all that. So it's kind of funny that everybody runs the other way when you ask them for money, but that's okay. So for my outlook on it is, I think it's well worth it. I think we've been talking about this a long time. I think Seamus pointed out, Director Murphy had pointed out that, we can be a leader here, and we've talked about leading the charge. And I know, we haven't led as quickly as people wanted us to lead in the past doing stuff like this. So I think it's well worth the investment. I think it's well worth being a leader on it. I think the other side of it too is political capital that we should get out of this. When we're able to invite our partners and our regional partners and other people onto the ferry to experiment it and ride it and promote it. So I'm completely in favor of it. I think it's worth the investment, even if we end up having to hold the whole bag. That it doesn't sound like we will, but if we do, I'm 100% confident that it'll provide us with a wide range of, credit, as we'll call it, for doing something like this. So that's where I'm at with it. Thank you.
Yeah, it'll certainly be out there on the waterfront every day. And questions, comments from other colleagues on the board, please.
Yep, I'll go next. Do we know roughly when this would start if we approve it?
The vessel is currently in the shipyard in north of Seattle. The action that we would take to authorize this would be a signal to bring it down to the Bay Area. There are barges available this month that could get it down here. And then our hope is that we could start it as early as June. And there are reasons why that might slip, weather, a number of reasons why it might be a little bit later than that. But as soon as June and July, I think would be a worst case scenario.
And would it run every night? It
would run every day, 7 days a week for 8 hours, 8-hour shift. And it would operate special event service to our Mission Bay temporary terminal. That's one reason why we're excited to start sooner, is that we can take advantage of the giant service and really maximize our exposure here.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity. It needs to be clear that it's a demonstration project, that financially it's in its current form. It's really hard to maintain this for a longer term than, say, 6 months. But if the funds, if WETA feels that we have the funds to do this, it's an opportunity that we can't miss. I do have concerns about the speed, the capacity, the time it takes to refuel, that we need to really understand for the long-term feasibility of hydrogen-powered vessels in our fleet, whether it's, bigger tanks, faster fueling mechanism. I don't know what the constraints are, but fully understanding those constraints in the future and the speed are, of course, big challenges that we need to overcome to make this part of our, especially our longer distance services that will probably rely on hydrogen fuel cells for a foreseeable future. I'm also wondering, so we've talked to public agencies and private interests, whether there are other philanthropic opportunities, and also whether this craft is set up so that it could be used for like a private tour or private event that generates a little bit more income in order to offset some of our costs. Just things to think about over the next couple of months. I also want to mention just, I understand that we want to keep the short hop fare very low at $1 a ride, and that we can't assume that every rider will pay. But it should be compared to the Muni fare of $2.50 for a Muni ride. And that's the clipper fare. I'd rather keep it low, but thinking for the future, what is the right cost of going from the ferry building to Pier 41, which is it's not a commuter trip. It is a recreational trip. So that's something for us to consider as well. Do we do $1 a fare now? Does it even make sense to collect that 80 or less than $100,000 or 50,000, right? So these are things that we need to think about for the future if we're going to run the service. But yes, I am very excited about the opportunities that this project gives us.
At 11 knots, we should sell more beer on it too.
So I'll go
The
last.
idea is coming.
All right, Jim, go ahead.
Dr. Moyer, yeah.
Thank you. A couple quick questions. So I don't know anything about the vessel itself, but I assume it's the same boarding configuration that we have. So we can handle the lower docks along the docks at both the ferry building and at Pier 41.
Yes, it can.
And then it's ADA accessible.
Yes.
Awesome. So that was really all I wanted to know. I'm excited about it. I like the fact that it adds to our modes. I don't know that at 75 passengers, it adds to our ability to respond to an emergency, but I do like adding to the modes. I assume there's no issues from a staffing perspective that the crews, that this will add to the crews' skill capabilities and be attractive. I can't tell from that face you just made, Pat, what that answer was. Okay, thank you. Good. All right, I'm with my fellow. Thank you for all the work that the team has done on this. I know it's a long time coming. Looking forward to seeing it.
Thanks, Director Moyer. I wish I was with you so I could have enjoyed Pat's expression. Director Tintley, any questions?
No.
Okay, Melanie, is anyone from the public? I guess we heard from Pace. Has anyone signed up to comment on this item?
No one has signed up.
Would anyone like to speak on item 8? This would be the time to let us know. Okay, with that, if not, we'll close the public comment on item number 8, and I'll take a motion if there's a motion to be taken.
I'll move.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you, Melanie. Please call the roll.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Tintley.
Yes.
The item passes.
Okay, thank you. Let's move along to item number 9, South San Francisco to San Francisco pilot service. This is an information item.
Thank you. I'll take this one too. This is another effort that we've been working on for quite some time. A little bit of a different outcome with this project, you'll remember that the board authorized us to proceed with soliciting proposals for a new route that would connect Oyster Point with San Francisco, both our Mission Bay ferry terminal that is temporary until the permanent Mission Bay terminal is complete, and also the ferry building. We have had long and productive conversations with the private operators. Challenges came up over the course of this time that were unanticipated, not insurmountable, but just took time to overcome. One of the challenges, obviously, is one we know well, and it's the slow return to work. When we started this process, we thought that we would see a very rapid return to the office, and with Oyster Point being such a growing, burgeoning employment center, that was a desirable place for us to explore piloting a new route and partnering with private operators potentially to do that. The discussions with private operators have been productive. It is time well spent. We've identified challenges and opportunities. We understand better what our opportunities are from a vessel characteristic standpoint, from a cost standpoint, from a crewing aspect, and we really, the thing holding us back is demand at this point. The customers that we would be serving at Oyster Point are themselves, as you can tell from the letter that they provided to the board, not willing to say that now is the right time for us to proceed with this pilot project. It may be the right time soon, perhaps this fall, perhaps even at some point next year. But with the customers themselves really not able to commit to providing the demand, ensuring that we're going to put our best foot forward with this pilot service, staff can't recommend proceeding with the project at this time. We did achieve some really important benefits, though, as an outcome of this. There were some inconsistent labor standards across the private operator environment compared to what Blue and Gold provides to crews. Those are now much more consistent as a result of these conversations than they were before. And that provides us with a tool, a new tool that we didn't have before, a new operating model that we can explore to help pilot some of these services when WETA doesn't have a vessel to be able to commit to them. And there are other opportunities. So as a next step, staff is going to be exploring some of those other opportunities. We want to make sure that WETA is a leader when it comes to new ferry service that might emerge throughout the Bay. And there are just a lot of discussions about areas where that may be happening in the future. We see the Treasure Island service, just popping up over the last several months as an example of that. And we want to make sure we have a seat at the table. This gives us the ability to have that seat. So we'll be working closely with the employers in Oyster Point to understand how the return to office environment evolves. And when the time is right, we will have a game plan that's been developed through these conversations to be able to come to the board and seek your get your input and bring to you for your consideration. Happy to respond to any questions or comments.
Yeah, thanks very much. Unfortunate that the return to work that we anticipated in South San Francisco didn't materialize in time, but I think that you're right. We learned a lot, and I think built some relationships in the process and set the stage for future opportunity. So I don't think it was a lot, a wasted effort by any means. Any questions or comments from the fellow directors? If not, any questions or comments from members of the public? Melanie, has anyone signed to speak on this item?
Nobody signed up, but we did receive those.
Yes, we did receive input. Okay, does anyone wish to speak on the item? Who's present? Okay, if not, we'll close the we'll close.
Jim?
There were, okay, good.
Go up to the podium.
Hi, I'm Alex Kriska from Prop. We were one of the submitters for the service. We submitted a letter. So just reiterate what we said. We feel it is kind of a good time to start when people are just starting to get back to work and aren't set in their ways as far as commuting goes. I think it'd be a challenge once they are set in their ways, trying to pull them out and peel them out of their cars later on. So that's my 2 cents. I think we laid it out clearly in our letter, but just want to reiterate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Any other members of the public wish to address the board on this? Okay, hearing not, we'll close the public hearing on item number 9 and move to a discussion in item number 10 on our 2-year budget outlook.
Thank you. I'm going to hand this to our CFO, Aaron McGrath.
Okay, I should ask.
Nate, can you?
Sorry. Go with the spreadsheet, not with the computer. Thank you. It's nice to see you. Nice to be healthy. I'll tell you that. COVID is no fun, I can tell you, even quadruple vax. Happy to be here today to give you kind of a brief overview of the 2-year outlook. I'm pressing that button you told me to press and it's not working. There we go. So today, what we wanted to give you is over the next 2 meetings leading up to the budget, give you first a high-level overview of what we're seeing in trends, and then give you a little information on how we're seeing year-end 22 this year ending up, and then what the next 2 fiscal years look like. And the main reason for this is the question that has been there pretty much since the beginning of the pandemic. What is our runway in terms of how long can we support the service and the costs that we have today, the decisions that we've made, the pandemic, fair program, all of those bigger picture questions to give us an idea of, do we need to decide today? When do we hit those times, and how patient can we be? This is a very high level view of the world. We will, as part of the budget, be boring into the details more, and the numbers are frankly changing every single day, particularly as it relates to fuel. And so in terms of when this spreadsheet was finalized over a week ago, things are changing pretty frequently. But to give you an idea of the update on the year-end close, to remind you, the current year budget was a $50 million budget. It was $47 million for operations, $3 million for planning and administration, funded by Fair Revenue, RM2, Measure J, and a high level of support from the federal government. They were the best that they could have been at the time, knowing what we knew. And frankly, not that we did a pretty good job, I think, looking at it, looking backwards. There's some reasons to hope, as we talked about earlier. There's return to ridership is happening now. Finally, it had started and then it stopped. Now it's starting again. But there's a particular uncertainty on how long the recovery could take. The world, we now have gotten used to uncertainty. It sort of feels like the norm these days. So to start with, on the revenue side of how we're seeing year-end close happening, the fair revenue budget was $8.2 million, 8.26. This is the chart that I showed you a few months ago, just a few more columns have been added since then. We started the year gangbusters. We thought things were going great. The red line you see were the budget assumptions. We had assumed that revenue would start low and slowly build over time. Instead, what we see is this up and down chaos related to the pandemic variants hitting and people going back to work and then not going back to work. Right now, we think the revenue is going to come in slightly below budget, $300,000, $350,000 lower. But it could be that things go gangbusters in the next 2 months and we're wrong about that. This is based on some continual growth after the March revenue, which you see here. But well, next month we might have a different number, but that's where we are right now. Fuel is our biggest challenge right now because, $350,000 for the fare revenue is a bit of a toggle, but millions of dollars rely on fuel going up and down. We budgeted again for $3 a gallon. This says latest cost $4.46. I think today we paid over $5. So it's a challenge. The other thing that we have found is that during the budget process, you will recall we were starting new service for fiscal year 22. We were using some new operating assumptions. In the end, we had two things have changed since the budget. One is the cost of fuel has been dramatically higher. The other thing is that we've used more gallons than we anticipated in the budget. It's about 15% more than were included in the budget. So those two things, I think the cost has been a bigger part of that, but both of those combined have led to the problems that we've talked about again and again. So our budget for fuel was 9.6 million. Our actuals through March are 9.2. So that budget is exhausted pretty much. Right now we're looking at 3.5 million over. That was last week's estimate was 3.5 million. So we'll continue to challenge ourselves to figure out how we're going to close the year, what the number is going to be. But the good news is we've worked really hard. Tim and his team have worked with our supplier Mansfield to amend the contract to include federal requirements. Our legal team helped us with doing that, making that change. And we now can bill the fuel as of April 1 to the federal money. So at least we're not burning our own limited resources because we would have exhausted our RM2 support, which is how we normally pay for fuel. So that's one of the mitigations. We are also looking at fixed price contracts where Mansfield has talked to us about pre-purchasing at a fixed price, a certain amount of our fuel at a reasonable rate. The downside of those contracts is that you're buying that fuel whether you need it or not, right? So if another pandemic were to shut down and we were wanting to stop service for a particular period of time, you would still have to purchase that fuel. So, trade-offs. So we're still analyzing that and working on that. And we'll have an update for you as soon as we know more on that. Excluding fuel, the good news is for the fiscal year and, other things are trending on budget or under budget, with the exception of a few minor categories. Some categories are up and some are down, but we believe that we'll be able to close on budget with the exception of fuel. We do have two major areas of savings, vessel operations of $1.7 million savings we're seeing in facility operations of $807,000. And I've detailed the reasons in the staff report, but Tim is also available on the call if you want to talk further about those savings. So again, in the June budget presentation, we'll have an update on what we hope to do is to minimize the fuel supplemental appropriation that we would need by using some of the savings that we've achieved. All of this makes it difficult to project 2 years out. And of course, fuel is the big one. It's at the top. Labor is another difficult projection, and ridership is a difficult projection. And the new normal is undefined. But I'm going to walk through all of those. First, starting just with the big picture, which you may not be able to see. I'm not sure if they can, you guys can't see this.
Elliott, you might be able to slide the squares up to the top, drag and drop.
There we go. It makes it a little bit smaller, but you know, we see a balanced budget. There is a path for that for the next 2 years using the revenues that we have available to us and the expenses that we anticipate. But I will have to walk through those with you. So let me see if I can slide this over a little more. It's a little bit smaller. There we go. So I'm going to walk you through the big picture on each of these. On the revenue side, our planning department did an amazing job putting together an analysis for the next 2 years. They created 3 different scenarios for us, similar to the way the same methodology and behind the scenes work that BART uses for its projections. We have some different assumptions, some different ridership trends, some different choices that we believe riders are making, but they're for purposes of the projection, what we've used is the base case analysis, which is in between the optimistic and the pessimistic, basically, scenario. So for the 2023 base case, it's a very reasonable ridership return assumption of 70% of our pre-COVID ridership. And that results in $11 million in revenue. For fiscal year 24, the assumption is ridership returning to 93% of pre-COVID, and that would generate a fare revenue of $15.9 million. So for sensitivity analysis, 5% changes is a little more than $500,000. If we had chosen the conservative revenue assumption, it would be $1 million less in the current year. And I believe it's 3 million if we used it in both years, I believe. Revenue bridge tolls, we've assumed 90% of our normal allocation in fiscal year 23 and a full allocation in fiscal year 24. They have not yet told us what they're going to give us, but we've had some discussions, and based on what we see happening at the bridges, that's what we're hoping for. Even though we're hopeful Regional Measure 3 will break our way this year and solve a lot of our problems, we're not assuming that at all. Measure J, we've held it constant. That will change a little bit based on the agreement. It's just a conservative assumption holding it constant. For federal relief money, it continues to be our main source of revenue right now. The current budget still assumes $3.7 million in the ARP funding, which is the current grant that we are actually right now we're drawing down the CRISA money, but that's just about exhausted. So we're going to be using the ARP money, and then we will need that money in fiscal year 23 and in 24. The assumptions that we're using right now, we would use almost all of that money and it would be exhausted at the end of fiscal year 24. So that's kind of the answer to what is the runway. It's two years, 2 more fiscal years. $3 million left over. So if any of our assumptions are wrong in the direction of being too optimistic, that money would be exhausted a little bit sooner. If ridership comes back faster, if fuel goes down faster, right, the money lasts longer. Labor for now, for this projection, we have utilized 3% increase in labor every year, and that is because things have not been completed with Blue and Gold's communications and its negotiations with the union. And we are awaiting some board direction today on staff COLAs. But every 1% increase increases our Blue and Gold costs by about $230,000, and 1% increases in staff salaries results in about $35,000 more. So to give you a sense of the toggle on that. Fuel, again, the biggest challenge for this projection, we assumed that prices would remain high and then normalize as supply normalizes to meet demand as it normally does. Who knows, the world is crazy, but it's based on some analysis over the next 18 months. And then as it normalizes, the assumption is that we'll go down to 375 in fiscal year 24. And to give you a sense of how volatile this is, I mean, 25 cents makes a big difference, $925,000 in terms of the amount of fuel we use. So it's a huge change. It's a tough one. That's a tough one to deal with. We do have some hopes, that things will get better. There's also some fuel efficiencies that Tim is hoping to get out of our brand new beautiful vessel, but it's a tough one. So to keep going, the non-salary costs are less of a swing in terms of the sensitivity. Fuel and labor are our biggest nuggets, and they're the ones that are more sensitive to some of these factors that are out of control right now. And like I said earlier, the budget will be based on a more detailed analysis. This is more applying one factor to everything rather than going through line by line and knowing what's happening with each input. So to give you a sense of the reserve, so knowing that our runway is 2 years, the next logical question is, well, then what do we do? What do we have? What are our reserves? And what if you're wrong? So to talk you through the reserves that we have available, there's what I'm putting in quotes fund balance because it's kind of an accounting term that not everybody agrees with, but all of our cash, for example, is sitting at the local agency investment fund, and there's $11 million there that's not committed to something else that is unencumbered and an unrestricted available fund balance. We have state transit assistance money that most agencies use for operations. Most of them draw it down every year to supplement their operating costs. WETA has not done that. WETA has been banking those funds, and there's $12 million, which is net of the amount that Jeff needs for the Untitled. That was our first draw on the STA funds, was to use it for matching funds for the Untitled project. We have RM1 money, which is there are 2 RM1 fund sources, but combined there are $23 million in accrued funds available. However, looking forward, we do have a 3-year capital minimum capital program for repair and replace. These are not new things. These are just repair and replacement, keeping the vessels and the terminals in good repair. And those are all federal funded capital programs, but in order to provide the matching funds, $14 million of that 23 million is, in our minds, set aside and should not be spent on operating needs. It should be saved for capital. So just to reiterate, the LAIF balance is a one-time cash resource, and the goal is to not touch that ever. It's really needed for cash flow. It's needed for emergencies. However, the STA and the RM1 fund sources are a renewable resource. We do get allocations every year of 1 to 2 million, depending on the fund source. So, if we don't tap into that for a couple of years, there will be more of it in 2 years for us to look at to see if we need. But that sort of gives you a sense of what I think are very healthy reserves for an agency that's been through 2.5 years of pandemic.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Rather than wait until the end?
I said this is my summary page.
Okay,
So.
no, I can wait. I'll number it. Okay.
So the summary is that we have 2 years of a runway in terms of federal funds and federal support, knowing what we know today. The budget work is ongoing. We will have more details for you at the June meeting. We do recommend, like I said, everything is changing so rapidly and every day is a new day, that we, regardless of what is in the budget and what's approved as part of the budget process, we did this year, we did a 6-month review that was just for the year, but I think what we should do is be constantly looking at these assumptions and at a minimum, come back at the 6-month mark and do this again, do another 2-year outlook for you to see if things are better or worse than we thought at this time. If things are, really volatile, then we'll do it more often. But if things are progressing as we anticipated, it wouldn't be as much a review at the 6-month mark. I think that's my last slide.
Do you mind going back to the last slide?
Yeah.
Jim, are you okay with me asking a question or you want me to wait my turn?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. I just want a clarification on the 23 million with the 14 million needed for capital. And I understand like we have capital projects in 3 years. And I just want to make sure I understand this.
Yeah.
Coming out, and we don't want to touch the 14 million, but if we had to, you could touch it, right? We would just delay capital projects. Is that?
You could. I will tell you, these are capital projects that some of which are like injector replacements, midlife refurbishments that you would need to keep the boats in good working order. So some of them could be delayed for a short period of time. It's that whole, how long before you start impacting the service that you can run if boats are, and I would defer to Tim to one of those projects is the Mare Island boat replacement, but Tim, I don't know if you want to say anything further on that.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it, Erin. There's definitely things that we could prioritize and things that we can delay, and there's other things that will probably end up costing us more money in the near term if we push them off. But if we get to that point, we can get together and prioritize and see what items that we can push without causing a increase in operating costs.
So back to the question. So it sounds like there's, sitting there, there's 23 million that's part of the reserve. And then another, what are we looking at? 9 million on top of the 23. Is that what I'm just trying to get an understanding of what really, if we don't touch the 14 million, what is unrestricted and what do our reserves look like at that point?
Yeah, so if you took the 14 out of the 23, 9, right? And then you have an additional 12, right? So that's 21. And then the 11, which I would not touch.
You would not touch.
I would not.
But if we had to, we could. I just want to make sure I'm clear on it. I'm not proposing touching anything, but I want to make sure as a board with the reserves, what I understand is if we had to, like if we were in a pinch.
You could touch some of that. I wouldn't recommend touching much of that. So for example, some of the capital projects, the delay between when you have to pay a bill and when you get reimbursed is quite large. So you could have a $2 million outlay that you have to sit on for a while till you get your cash back. In addition, we prepay blue and gold for operations. So there's some cash, like a $5 million minimum, like just for cash flow purposes.
Yeah.
That I know in the past we'd went through a whole process of selling bonds in order just to have that cash flow ability, right? So that's really your cash flow ability and your emergency if there was a big earthquake and you needed a bunch of cash.
From what I hear from you, we have a pretty healthy reserve right now, unrestricted reserve for an agency our size.
Yeah.
And coming out of what we've been in. And I understand the fuel thing and I apologize for that I don't have any control over what fuel companies that our oil companies are doing to us. I just think going into our conversation later and talking about labor, I want to make sure we're clear on where we have to move and what we have to do, and everybody understands that. So, all right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Erin, did you have more comments to make?
No, that would conclude my prepared remarks. I'm just happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, I'll just comment. I don't have a question. You're dealing with tremendous volatility and unknowns. So I think you've done a good job of trying to nail down what looks more likely than unlikely compared to the next thing. And that's, the farther you get out, the more, the more uncertain and wishful thinking is involved. So I think it's a good job that's just possible at this time to kind of take a 2-year look at this. So let me turn it over to fellow directors and see if there's any questions or comments on the budget outlook.
My first question, and first of all, Erin, thank you for making this so easy for us to absorb and for having the percentage versus dollar comparisons. It just makes it so much more tangible. So thank you for a great presentation and great report. The RM3, I know we don't want to at all think of it as coming. Do we have any estimate of what it would add annually, a range in operating funds if it gets approved?
I've ignored RM3 because it's not my reality, but I think Seamus has those numbers off the top of his head, don't you?
Yeah, it's approximately 35 million a year in operating funding and another 300 million in capital.
And so you said 35 million a year.
Per year.
So that's a huge influx.
It is.
Potential influx. And that would increase over time, or is it?
It would be the current fiscal year dollar amount.
Okay.
And so it would increase, but not, not enough to make it more valuable when we spend it.
Yeah, okay. So that's another, just for us to keep in mind the size of that budget or that potential revenue source. And then as we are thinking of transitioning towards zero emission vehicles, I wonder if there are opportunities for low carbon fuel standard credits. I think that's a number of years away, and I don't know what the offset would be, but it's something for us to keep an eye on. And I wonder, hydrogen is not mentioned on their website, but I'm wondering if hydrogen is part of their credits. And the hydrogen, if we're now introducing this for 6 months, is there an opportunity to, even if we're leasing and it's not directly through us, but just something for us to consider if there are opportunities. And if not, that might be something for us to just be aware of, that it's not actually something that would come back to WETA, but rather electric charging infrastructure providers, Blue and Gold, or others who would benefit from it. But it's definitely something we should keep in the back of our minds as well. I have no other comments. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. That's a really good thought. We will look into that.
Thanks, Director Alba. Other questions on the budget? Comments?
Yes, please.
Director Moore.
No, did Tony have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest maybe that that the 3-month review would be not, you suggested you'd be willing to do it. I'm thinking that we really ought to do that during the coming fiscal year, looking at it every 3 months, because it is so volatile. Anyway, that's all.
Great point. Director Moore.
Yeah, thank you. Erin, first and foremost, thank you for being here to share that with us. It's really easier to follow in person. And also, just echoing Director Alba, thank you for the report and the simplicity to follow such complicated matters. It's such a best practice, and really have had that question outstanding for a long time. So delighted to hear we can likely eke 2 more years out of it, although the unknowns that you pointed out at the beginning are pretty substantial and could eat away at that 20 million fast. I think if I did the math right, that 20 million is about 35% of the 2023 budget number of 58 million, if I did that right. Yeah, so that's super healthy. I guess my question for you is, how do you think about all of this, though, in terms of our mandate for emergency response? So we're talking about like our status quo operations.
Right. It's a good question. It's something we've been talking about as part of the budget process. having been through a couple of emergencies up in Sonoma County, I can tell you there are significant resources once the governor or the federal government has declared if it's a big disaster, you know, you as an agency, those resources come to bear pretty quickly and you don't have to use as many of your own resources for those. So the question becomes, what is the minimum amount of money you want to set aside for those events? And are they going to be big or are they going to be small? Because the reimbursement varies depending on whether it's a federal disaster or justice. If it's just a state disaster, right? So that's a really good question, and I don't have a pat answer. And I don't know, Seamus, if you have any thoughts, but you know, this is why I was saying, you know, at a minimum, the cash balance is really important to pay bills after disruption. So just thinking out loud, what goes into it is your operations get disrupted and your revenue gets disrupted. So you're just not only like, what are the expenses of an emergency, which you could maybe get reimbursed for through FEMA or Cal OES, but how are your cash flows going to get interrupted in the meantime, right? If like in the last major earthquake, you know, people weren't going to work if they didn't have to, or if they, you know, were doing other things, commute patterns suddenly change, right? So I think it's a tough question that I don't know the answer to, but these are the things that we need to talk through in the budget process. I do think talking through what reserve policies the board has opined on reserves in the past. In doing my research, the board has talked about 2 months of operating being on reserve, and about a $10 million capital reserve is what I found in my research. So I think we should talk about whether those are appropriate levels given our role as an emergency responder. 2 months seems really low to me. I would like to see that be higher for us on an ongoing basis, but I'm certainly open to board input on what, you know, your experience in your other worlds that you've seen. And of course, I have lots of data on other agencies and other governments and what they consider to be a healthy reserve, but they're not all emergency response agent, right? That's a big part of what we do. So I don't know, Seamus, if you have any.
I would just add on the capital side, I think when we are making decisions about whether to use these resources to support capital projects that need to have their budgets fully funded, emergency response is a part of that equation. When we're talking about the benefits that we receive, we need to think about what additive emergency response capability we would get from those projects.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. In my experience, two months would be too short just because of we have to advance the funds and it takes so long for those agencies to repay them.
Yeah.
I'd be concerned, and yet, as we proved during the pandemic, we want to make payroll. Right. And if we don't make payroll, we can't continue to serve our functions and have business continuity when the opportunity presents itself. So I'd be very interested in looking at that policy again if the chance presents itself. And then my other, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but what I've been following on the fuel side feels like it's a multi-year problem, not a multi-month problem. So I'm concerned. I don't know what that means. I don't have an action or a question there, I guess, but just I guess it just sets the stage for we could still have a current budget year problem.
Yeah.
Meaning just an action, not a problem. Sorry, I don't mean.
Yeah, we probably will have a current year action that we'll have to bring to you in June. It looks like, given $5 today.
Yeah.
Which is lower than what you're paying at the pump, but that's what we're paying as an agency through our contract in the diesel, you know, bulk supply market.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge there, and they're, you know, been doing a lot of reaching out to other agencies to try to figure out how they're managing it. They're, in addition to purchases, there's a way to set up contracts so that you smooth your expenses over time, but those, you're not saving any money, you're just smoothing. And now it's a terrible time to try to implement some of those.
Yeah, you're at the wrong time. part of the curve, but I have also seen where agencies have maybe not purchased their full supply, but half of their supply and laid off, hedged some of their risk.
Right, yeah, and the one proposal that we've received from our current supplier, it was 1/3 of our gallons. Which is guarantee you're gonna buy that many gallons, and maybe 1/3 is a reasonable risk for us to take.
Yes, I understand. Well, thank you. But again, great practice. And I had the same thought as Director Tintley of given such volatility right now.
Sure.
We'll probably be hearing from you a lot anyway on the budget, but if that volatility continues, I'd really welcome a quarterly report until it levels out. Thank you again.
Okay, thanks. Maybe we could pull a slide down. And that will make it more user-friendly.
Oh, pull the slides down. Sorry.
There you go. There you go. There you guys are. I think everyone on the board had a chance to comment, so I would just reiterate, this is a really good presentation. It's simple, and it begs a lot of questions that can't be answered at this point, aside of best reasonable speculation. So, members of the public who would like to comment? Does anyone signed up on this item, Melanie?
No one has signed up.
Would anyone like to comment, please? Okay, from this angle, it doesn't appear so. So we'll close the.
Chair Wonderman, I just want to thank Director Moyer for bringing that excellent point up about emergency operations and our funding during those. I think that's critical, and I so appreciate that you brought it up today. And there was one more point, but I'm going to leave it at that now because, fantastic contribution.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing up the point on RM3 and the rather huge implications that goes, a certain way we hope it goes. And what does that mean? That's something we probably have to get thinking about awfully quickly as a board. Okay, let's move on. I think we'll close this and we'll move on to item number 11, overview of WETA's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise DBE program, Small Business Enterprise SBE element, and strategies to increase DBE and SBE participation. This is an information item.
Thanks. Well, Lauren's making her way up here. I'll just thank her and Terrence for really paying a lot of attention to this. It's definitely been a focus of the staff. I know the board is very interested in strategies that can help us do better on the DBE front. And Lauren and her team have given a lot of thought to how we can approach this and how we can measure our success and how we can pivot if the approaches that we're talking about today aren't successful. So staff is committed, the agency is committed to doing better in this area, and Lauren will let us know some of our challenges and how we are opting to approach this.
Yep. Afternoon, everybody. So the written report is very exhaustive. I tried to provide as much information as I could for you. I don't want to go over all of it unless you want me to. So I was going to focus my verbal report just on the challenges and then the strategies. So please feel free to stop me and make me elaborate on other stuff if you would like me to. So for about the last 10 years, we've identified 4 overarching challenges with our disadvantaged business enterprise or DBE program. And the first major challenge is that there's just a very limited number of DBEs in the marine fields. There's a limited number of firms in general in the marine fields, and there's even a smaller number of DBEs. That is in part because of the type of work we do. It's vessel construction, vessel refurbishment, terminal rehabilitation work, and those types of work are highly specialized. It requires certain certifications, training, knowledge, expertise. The table that's listed on, that's provided on page 4, gives you the availability of DBEs and some of the common areas of work that we have in our contracts. And so if you look at column C and column E, you'll see just the actual numbers of DBEs in column C and then the relative availability in some of these work areas. And you can notice that most of it's under 1% in terms of DBE availability. And I'll talk a little bit more on that now, but that doesn't even go deep into whether or not those firms specialize in the marine field. So a lot of other ferry operators might have the same challenge, although they also run bus service. So we're a little bit restricted. We can't grab DBE participation from bus-related contracts or other types of contracts that have more DBE participation. And in years when we've had landside construction projects, when this building was built, North Bay, Richmond, downtown San Francisco Ferry Terminal, we've been able to achieve some DBE participation and even meet our goal. But that's because there's landside construction and it doesn't have that specialization that happens in the marine field. The second challenge is that our DBE achievement is influenced by the type of contracts that we program federal funds towards. So we program the majority of our federal funds, federal formula funds, towards vessel replacement, refurbishment, or terminal rehabilitation projects. And those are projects that have low DBE availability, and we actually have a high federal share in those projects. It's usually about 80% federal, 20% local. We program them because of the eligibility requirements for those federal funds and the limited availability of other funds to fund those critical projects. So for the last two triennial periods, which was federal fiscal year 17 through 19, and then 20 through 22, 17 through 19, we programmed 75% of all of our federal funds towards those vessel refurbishment and terminal rehabilitation projects. And then in this current one, which is FY 20 through 22, it's 100% of our federal funds. So all of our federal funds are going to those areas with low DBE availability. What impacts this challenge even more is that several of the vessel refurbishment projects that we have each year are engine overhaul projects that have to be conducted by the original engine manufacturer to maintain the warranty on the vessel. And there's none of the OEMs are DBEs. So you can take that big chunk off the top and we're not going to get any DBE availability for those types of projects. The third challenge is the lack of granularity of the DBE database that results in an inaccurate DBE availability or ultimately our DBE goal. So FTA, we can only count DBEs that are certified through the California Unified Certification Program. We're directed by FTA to use that database that's run by the UCP to set our overall goal. And that database doesn't provide the level of detail to look at DBEs and see whether or not they specialize in the marine field. So if you go back to the table that I showed you on page 4, these DBEs are just DBEs. They don't necessarily specialize in the marine field. So there's certain requirements for electrical work on a vessel. We don't have electrical ground on a vessel, so you have to have that experience in terms of how to operate in that area. Painting is different on a vessel. You have to have a lot of the shipyards look for a certain certification for painters because there's special handling procedures for that kind of paint. Same with welding and plumbing and all those types of fields that go into the refurbishment or vessel construction projects. And so what ends up happening is that the availability is inflated and therefore your goal is higher than what's realistic in terms of what you can actually achieve. But there's not much that we can do about that unless you want to get on the phone and call every single one of those firms that are listed. The fourth challenge is how we're restricted in terms of counting DBE participation. There's a couple of points here that are really important. We can only count the federal share of funds. So a lot of our projects, for example, where we get high DBE availability, like landside construction, for example, this building, we had, I think it was 19% federal funds in this project. Richmond Ferry Terminal was 15%. Downtown San Francisco was 12%. So we can only count 12% of the funds that are actually awarded to a DBE towards our achievement that we report to FTA. Secondly, we can't include DBE participation on non-federally funded contracts. That's a result of California's Proposition 209, which prohibits preferential treatment on the basis of race. And so there has been times in the past where we have awarded a prime contract to a DBE firm, or we've gotten DBE participation on a prime contract, and we can't count that in terms of our achievement. And then finally, we can only count DBEs that are certified by the state of California's UCP. So that really has an impact when we have vessels that have a project out of state. So there's been times where we have had DBE participation, but it's been a Washington state DBE, but we can't count that participation. We have been working with FTA since 2016 to make a change to that, but I think we're getting a little bit of traction, but it hasn't happened quite yet. So all of those challenges have contributed to our inability to meet our goal for 6 of the last 2 years. We've met it 4 years, and those were in years when we awarded these large landside contracts, downtown, this building, North Bay. We've been able to achieve a lot more SBE participation. For example, the contract that was awarded today, there's just a lot more SBEs in the field than there are DBEs. And so we've increased our SBE goal in that period. And then the new vessel construction, that is like the place where all of the challenges are highlighted right there, because we've never been able to achieve DBE participation on any of our vessel construction projects. There is a potential to get some DBE participation from one of our contracts underway now, but the prime hasn't executed a contract with that sub yet, so we can't do that, but yeah. So we're adding more vessels to the fleet every day. The Dorado came in last week, and with that means more vessel projects, more engine overhauls, midlifes, quarter lives, more types of projects that have that low DBE availability. And so the trend of programming federal funds towards those types of projects is not really gonna let up. And so we'll have an increased, we'll continue to have a challenge meeting our DBE participation, unless we secure federal funds on additional inside projects, which we're definitely trying to do, but that's what it takes to kind of get that DBE participation up. So we have some options that we can put in place. We can either increase the demand for DBEs, or we can increase the availability of DBEs, or try to implement strategies that do one of those two things. The staff report lays out a couple of different options in terms of increasing the demand for DBEs. So first off, we could start setting DBE contract goals. In order to do that, there's a lot of things that have to happen. You need to prove that there's disparate treatment in the marketplace. And you do that by conducting a disparity study. And that disparity study has to prove that there's discrimination in the marketplace in order to set contract goals. Some of the pros with that strategy it would do exactly what we want. It would force the primes into getting DBE participation or showing good faith efforts that they tried to do that. If no disparity is found in our contract or in our disparity study, we cannot set DBE contract goals. And if there's no DBEs available to do the work, it's not necessarily the case that we're going to get DBE participation on the contract. The prime contractor might just need to show their good faith efforts that they tried and document it. A disparity study does cost a good amount of money, and it takes a lot of time. It's estimated about $350,000 to $400,000 and 12 months of work. There's a potential we could split it with another agency. And they also have a shelf life of about 3 to 5 years, because it's dependent on an availability study based on how many DBEs are out there, and that changes over time. It requires more work from the agency as well as the proposer, and it could result in procurement delays if we don't award to a prime contractor, they have a chance to do administrative reconsideration, and there's a process for that in place, and a potential procurement delay. So that's method one. Method two is setting SBE contract goals. So because that's a race neutral measure, we don't have to go through a disparity study to set SBE contract goals. So it would be the same process in terms of setting DBE contract goals. The primes would have to find DBE participation or show good faith efforts that they couldn't find SBE participation. And a couple of the cons associated with that is that, and I'm sorry, I should say that every DBE is considered an SBE. So the goal there is that by setting an SBE goal, there's a potential to grab some DBE participation. Setting SBE contract goals requires a little bit more work from the agency as well as the proposer, just like the DBE goals, and it also could result in procurement delays. In terms of increasing the availability of DBEs, there's 3 strategies that we laid out here. we could conduct outreach to marine firms that exist already, folks that we work with, folks that are in the field. We've done some of that in the past, but we could, double our efforts and kind of cast a wider net. The pros associated with that is it's targeted outreach to firms that are already in that field. The cons associated with that strategy is that there might not be a lot of impetus for that firm to become DBE certified if there's no kind of leg up in terms of competing on a contract. Second strategy is to host a workshop to overcome barriers to entering to firms that are entering the marine field. As I mentioned before, it's highly specialized. It requires a lot of certification and experience and knowledge. And so we could work together with other shipyards or ferry operators, trade representatives, and DBEs and SBEs to educate them on what they would need to do in order to enter that field. What kind of experience would they need? Certifications for marine painting, welding, marine-based electrical and pipe fitting experience, and the types of insurance that they might need in order to compete on these contracts. The pros associated with that strategy is that it specifically targets overcoming barriers for those DBE and SBE firms, which is one of the intents of the regulation. And it has the potential to increase DBE availability. It also provides an opportunity for the industry to work together on workforce development efforts. When I was at PVA, I talked to several of the shipyards that were out there and a couple of the ferry operators, and there was a lot of interest in doing something like this to work together to educate small businesses on what they would need to do to become enter into the marine fields. The cons associated with this, it could, depending on how many workshops that we put together, it could require a significant amount of effort over a period of time. That effort could be split by these different entities that are interested in doing this workshop. And then the third and final strategy is to establish a mentor protege program. And that would really be, working with prime contractors and small businesses, pairing them together so that the prime contractor can kind of, take the small business under their wings and teach them about all the things that they would need to do in order to be competitive on these contracts. That could, there's a couple of pros associated with that in terms of the subcontractor really getting that experience and having more of an increased chance of winning one of these contracts. The cons associated with that is tracking the success. The program could be hard. And it also, establishing it, implementing it, and monitoring the program would require resources that I believe are above and beyond what we can absorb at our existing staffing levels. So looking at all of the different strategies, based on my experience and doing this for several years now, I would suggest that we move forward with hosting a workshop to overcome barriers and doing that targeted outreach to those marine firms that are already out there as kind of a first step to see what kind of increased participation we receive. But I would love to hear from you and understand what your thoughts are on all these different strategies and anything else that's in the memo.
Well, that's a lot.
Sorry.
All right, you can offer the quiz at the end of the class. Members of the board, questions, comments, please.
If nobody else wants to go first, I will. So I had your number one choice down as my number one choice too. So I absolutely think the presentation was really good. It wasn't boring like you told me it was going to be. It was really good. It gives me a better understanding in depth of what's going on, and like from what little knowledge I have now, I have a wide variety, a bigger amount of knowledge. But it sounds like, and no disrespect to anybody out there, the maritime industry needs to catch up, because I know, when you start looking at landside projects and we talk about transit like AC Transit or BART or these other transit agencies, it's real. They've worked on this. It's happened, and they've brought people in from trade unions and other arenas and contractors that have focused on it because they made it a priority. And I think this is another arena that, we as WETA can make an impact. And one of the reasons we should lead in this is because we live in the Bay Area, And this is a growing part of the transit world. And I don't see it stopping if we keep going the way things have been going the last few years with ferry service. I know I have a little bit of knowledge from the local shipyard here in Alameda who struggles with this very thing of keeping people in the trades, bringing in diversity into the trade, being able to compete. So I think the workshop idea is a great idea. And I would expand it beyond, some of our contractors. I would get the trade unions involved and other people involved in reaching out because, if anybody's paying attention, a lot of our trade workers now it's a pretty diverse group of people coming into the trades that are doing the work now. And I think it's a prime opportunity to reach out and get the maritime partners and all the maritime industry involved here in the Bay Area with our contractors and actually setting out there that, this is important to us as an agency and as a board. And it should be important to everybody else because we do have a lot of projects. And I thought it was really interesting about how you brought up the waterside projects and the fact that, when we build these boats, they have to go back under warranty to those contractors and to those areas. And if it doesn't exist now, it's not going to exist when we send the boat back. And that's a 30-year commitment to somewhere. So, with tax dollars and dollars that people are putting in. So I'm definitely on board about this workshop. I'd love to participate and help where I can. And I think it's important. So that's my comments. Great presentation. It really gives me a good understanding now of every time I sit here and listen to this of why this is happening.
Great, thank you. Other members, directors?
I can go, yeah.
Director Alba.
Yeah, thank you for breaking it down for us and realizing the complexities in the maritime space. Yeah, it's hard. To me, whether the DBE works in Washington State, working on a boat, a ferry for us, or here in California where we don't have the presence of the construction company, I think we need to also continue pushing at the national level, at the federal level, so that we do take credit for DBE participation in Washington, in the state of Washington. If we can't build that ferry down here, Washington is one of our only locations, but the DBE participation coming from there is equally important to the United States on a federal contract, as if it were here in California. And that also, I mean, if we want, in the future, want to have construction here in the Bay Area, fantastic if we can find the location. So I think that should be our number one priority. That doesn't diminish the need to have the workshops happening at the same time. But I think it's almost that, if we haven't been able to push this for the past 6 years, maybe it's time to bring in our lobbyists to push it. And I think that's my comment. I do agree with Director Del Bono in the workshop approach locally.
Excellent, thank you. Tony?
I wanted to better understand one aspect of the report. Very good report, very thorough. You mentioned that we don't get full credit for what we do accomplish because it's related to the amount of federal funds given in a particular project. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, we can only count the federal portion of the fund. So if it's 80% federally funded, we can only count 80% of the funds that are awarded to a DBE, or on the landside contracts that are lower, 10 or 12%.
So it actually doesn't reflect then what we're actually doing with the DBE situation now.
Correct. Yes.
Well, that might be something also that if we're going to call on our lobbyists, which is probably what's needed, advocacy, couldn't we change that? Isn't that because of the federal law?
Yeah, I'm not sure I haven't heard an argument to change it. It doesn't mean we couldn't try, but the federal government only cares about what amount they put into the project. And so
But that's true. But on the other hand, their objective is to, I would think, is to encourage DBE participation. And when we don't get full credit for it, are they really accomplishing that? Well, anyway,
Yes,
that
yes.
was just a thought.
Thank you. It's good question. Director Moyer?
I just want to thank you for, first of all, your passion for the topic and commitment to it, because I think in the time I've been on the board, you've taught us this a few times, and each time it gets a little clearer. And this report was excellent, and thank you for presenting it in person as well, so we can feel that passion from you. It is complicated, and I agree that I don't understand. I was trying to think, is there an interstate commerce reason that there's, we can't count DD participation from one state to the next, but I think I've shared with you before that I thought that was stupid. So I'll just say it again, it's stupid. So hopefully we can get that changed, but really appreciate it. And I do appreciate the emphasis on the SBE attributes. It just, in the broader corporate world, as part of the emphasis towards ESG and just trying to have a mindset of inclusivity for all the reasons that we've seen in the last 2 years. It seems just arcane now, but appreciate all that you're doing, and anything that we can do as board members to help. I'd like to align myself with Director Del Bono and offer to be present as well. So thank you.
Thank you. So, appreciate all the comments from the board. Obviously there's a lot of obstacles. There's been some progress and some clarity, and, we have our work, ahead of us. So we've got to keep trying, be creative. I like the workshop idea too. So I think we should, without objection, try to proceed with that. Let me open the comments up to members of the public. Has anyone signed on for item number 11, Melanie?
No one has signed up to speak.
Thank you. Is anyone present, either in person or virtually, interested in commenting on item 11?
If there isn't anybody in the public that wishes to speak, I think I wanted to just offer a couple of observations, having, spent a fair amount of my career in dealing with the DBE programs over the decades, and the challenges that we've seen through the courts. And it is a very daunting program. And what I would say is that on the one hand, we have very prescriptive federal requirements that tell us how we count and tell us what needs to be in there to count. But I don't know that that necessarily means that we can't be recognized to the extent that WETA is able to incorporate greater DBE participation overall. So that is to say that while we may not be able to count the dollars that are not federal, but we have some achievements that we can show that that's a context and a perspective that we don't want to forget about. And I think there is that dimension that we want to keep in mind. I understand quite clearly the regulatory constraints and the constitutional and the legal principles that go into why it is that way. But I think to the extent that we do things within the boundaries and we continue to do those race neutral efforts, that we continue to maintain a good pipeline and network of entities that possibly could be cultivated. And we look for ways to incentivize, because I think one of the problems is we don't have too many tools left to incentivize. But indirectly through the SBE program element, through the various networking opportunities and cultivating that awareness. And I think there's more murmurs now at the regional level that the disparity studies, as expensive and time consuming as they are and as statistically driven as they are, maybe there would be some opportunity to partner with agencies that are of similar mind to try to create, a little bit more of a foundation for using.
Can I respond to
Contract.
one thing that you said? So we, in the past and actually currently, we do track the DBE participation outside of that federal percentage, just because it's been something that's annoyed me in the past. So we are tracking that, and it's something that we can bring forward moving forward to you guys, so you can see the difference.
I would just echo that. I think showing the criteria filling DBE participation and our informal DBE participation on our projects, and having the tables that you have in here show that informal DBE participation would be fantastic. And also continue having that as our discussion point at the federal level.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Madeline.
Yeah, thanks, Madeline, for that comment.
It's a hard job.
It's a hard job.
Yeah. Shouldn't have to be. Okay, any other public comments on, or other members of the board want to react and reflect on this item? Okay, if not, what we need to do shortly is go into closed session to deal with a couple of items. Before I call those items, I think it's only fair to the members of the public who joined us, because we may be gone for a while, is to take any non-agendized public comments first. So without objection, I'm going to move item number 14 up to the next item. So that's public comments for non-agenda items. Melanie, has anyone signed up to speak on 14?
No one has signed up.
Would anyone present like to address the board on any item not on this agenda at this time? Melanie, I guess not. So we'll close the public comment item on 14, and we're going to go into a closed session. And it's a two-part closed session. The first part is part A, is a conference with our labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 pursuant regarding unrepresented employees. And the agency representative is Seamus Murphy, the executive director. Item B is conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, paragraph D, paragraph 2. One case. So that's what we're going to be going to closed session on. We'll come and report the results of the closed session in the following item once we're done. So we're going to retreat into closed session now. Folks are welcome to stay. If you don't, have a great couple of weeks or a month until we see you again. Thank you very much.
Stay on.
Okay, we kick everybody off.
Yeah.
Good job.
So,